Hey everybody, welcome to Garden Time with Belle. Today is part 3 of my 5-part series on the things I wish I had known as a new gardener. Whether you're brand new to gardening or you have a lot of experience growing plants, sometimes it can be confusing when it comes to figuring out what does a particular plant need in terms of sunlight. And the plant labels don't help us much either. If you've ever stood in your garden with your plant tag that says full sun, part shade, full shade, you get the idea, and wondered, what the heck does that mean for my yard? You're not alone. Today's video is going to take the guesswork out of how to interpret what these things mean and how to decide what is the right spot in your garden for a particular type of plant. Before we dive into today's conversation about sun requirements, I'm going to invite all of you to like and subscribe to my channel. Doing that really helps me grow my channel. It helps me continue to share free gardening content with viewers just like you. And it really is an opportunity for me to grow my channel and reach out to more people that might be just beginning their gardening journey. Well, I've got some hot tea here on this cold January day, and I've got my notes today again because I have a lot of great information that I want to share with you all. And just to let you all know that my information that I'm sharing is as evidence-based as I could find. Some of you may know that I am a certified master gardener in the state of Missouri, and I'm using a lot of information from the master gardening courses that I've took and the publications through University of Missouri Extension. And of course, I'm also always going to share with you my own personal experiences in the garden as a gardener for, I think, maybe 40 years now. So it's a mixture of evidence-based, great information from reliable sources out there, but also my own personal experiences in the garden. So I think that'll be a nice mixture for us. So all right, I've got a few steps, first of all, that I want to share when it comes to just thinking about sunlight and how important that is for our plants, but getting it right can be the difference between a healthy, thriving, beautiful plant and a plant that just does not make it in your garden. So let's talk about step 1. Observe before you plant. One of the most important things you can do as a gardener, especially as a beginner, is simply observe. Before planting anything, take some time to study the area where you plan to place your plants. Study that sunlight throughout the day. This could be, where you're going to plant something in the ground, in raised beds, or where you plan to locate your pots and containers. Ask yourself, how many hours of sunlight is in this area during the day? Does the sun happen to come and go in that particular space? You don't need a bunch of fancy tools to figure this out. Just take a couple of days in a row and look at what the sunlight patterns are for a particular area where you want to grow your plants. All right, step 2, I want you to notice shade from structures and trees. Things like fences, your house, a greenhouse, even large trees can dramatically impact the amount of light that's going to reach a particular area of your garden. A spot that looks sunny in the morning may look completely different in the afternoon because you've got a structure there or a shade tree. And so that's why you and your neighbor, you might have completely different growing conditions based on what kinds of things are in your yard that might be impacting the amount of light your plants are getting. Step 3, sun strength can really change by the season and also by the location. Here's something I really wished I had known earlier on, and that is that not all sunlight is equal. The strength of the sun changes throughout the year, and it is dependent upon where you live. Think about the time of year. Of course, the strength of the sun in the middle of summer is much different than in the middle of winter because of where the sun is placed in the sky. The other thing is location. My sun here in mid-Missouri in the middle of July is very different in strength from the sun of South Florida at that time of year, or in Arizona, or if I were gardening in the upper Midwest, say northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin. So depending upon your location, how much sunlight your plants can take will make a difference. Considering the strength of sunlight in your location can be a big mind shift for new gardeners, and really to recognize that Your garden is unique, so you can't compare it to somebody else's garden, even in the same area. Study, study, study your own space, your own area of the country, and that will help you be a really successful gardener. So here's a concept that you may not have considered, and that is that sunlight and temperature work together. And because they work together, sometimes some of your plants will stall. Here's a fascinating fact that many gardeners don't know, and that is that once the outside temperatures reach about 86 degrees or above and stay there for 2 or 3 days, most of our plants will stall out, meaning that photosynthesis will really dial down and they won't be able to continue growing. They'll just stall. So if you've ever wondered why your tomato and pepper plants aren't either producing new fruit or the flowers on them might dry up and fall off, this is often the reason. And I didn't learn this for a long, long time in my gardening, but it makes sense. High temperatures affect photosynthesis. It stops happening. And so fruit production for things like tomatoes and peppers will almost shut down for that period of time. On the flip side, cooler temperatures often slow photosynthesis and growth. Our plants are responding to the environment all the time, even when it doesn't look like much is happening. So let's talk about sun requirement that we find on labels, on plant tags, on seed packets, and this section will hopefully demystify what do those terms mean. So for instance, in this little baggie, I have placed all of my plant labels from what I purchased last year for my 2025 garden. I mean, it could be, a rose bush, whatever it is, they go in here and that kind of helps me keep track of what new things I introduced to my garden. So I grabbed a couple of plant tags and actually a seed packet because if you follow my channel, you know I grow hundreds and hundreds of seeds. So they both typically will give you some advice around what kind of sun your particular plant requires. And so in the case of this hardy hibiscus that I planted cookies and cream last year from Proven Winners, really a wonderful plant. If you haven't grown hardy hibiscus, you need to. But anyways, okay. So this plant text says full sun in all caps and then part sun. It's a little bit confusing. We're going to talk about that. On my beautiful seed packet from Floret Farms, I grew some dahlias, Cancun girls, and this particular seed packet will say sight, and then it says full sun. So what does this really mean? This is really great information for newer gardeners and beginning gardeners to understand. All right, so let's break it down. Full sun. Full sun on your packets or your description tags means at least a minimum of 6 hours, but probably 8 hours plus a day of full sun. Okay, the next category, the plant tag that says part sun or part shade. And what that generally means is that plant's going to require 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. However, where you plant that plant makes a difference. If you are gardening here in where I garden in the zone 6B in mid-Missouri and south, you want to think about, I don't want my plant, if it needs part shade or part sun, to get afternoon sun. Afternoon sun can bake your plant. So in my neck of the woods and further south, I'm going to recommend if it says part sun and part shade, it gets 4 to 6 hours of morning sun, not afternoon. If you happen to garden in zones 2, 3, 4, you garden way north in the US, you're up in, upper Wisconsin, the Dakotas, whatever, where it gets pretty chilly, you can probably get away with afternoon sun when it says part sun or part shade. So think about, again, where you're located in your neck of the woods. The final category is shade. So when you're thinking about shade, realize that that plant tag is really recommending that your particular area gets 4 hours or less of sunlight per day. This can include areas under large trees. This can include areas like on the north side of your house. I have a north perennial bed, and when it's My plants that are closest to the house are the ones that get the most shade. And then if your bed's really deep, the further away from the house you get, you can plant things that require more sunlight because they're going to be not shaded by a big structure. So don't forget about when you're planting things under shade trees that have a thick canopy of leaves, or you're planting your plants up near structures. Pay attention to that. And oftentimes those are areas that require shade. Those are areas that get less than 4 hours of sunlight a day. So here's something encouraging, and that is the fact that very few plants require complete shade. In fact, things like hostas and ferns often do well with a little bit of sunlight. There aren't too many gardens or gardening spaces that are just complete darkness or total shade all day long. So don't be too concerned that you have to get it in a spot that's really, really shaded the vast majority of the day. I want to give everybody a bonus tip, and that would be to know or understand your hardiness zone. The USDA hardiness zone maps can give you a general idea of which trees, shrubs, and perennials are likely to survive the coldest winter temperatures in your area. So I'm going to make sure I include a link for that where you can go online to put in your zip code to look up your hardiness zone. There are also a few other maps that you might want to look up online for your particular area of the country, and that would be the heat maps. Heat maps are based on letting you know how many days in your growing area are 86 degrees or above. And remember, I just talked about photosynthesis going down when things get to be 86 degrees or above, when that sign kind of stalls out, and when fruit production, tomatoes and pepper plants kind of stall out in growing and producing that beautiful vegetable. So when you are in a zone with really high temps for a long period of time, that can affect your gardening. So check out what your heat map zone is online. The other thing that you might find interesting, there's another climate map. It's called the Sunset Garden Climate Map, and it looks at heat, cold, moisture, and altitudes across the US, and that might be more helpful to you. I guess the bottom line is there are many, many variables in addition to sunlight that can influence the success of your gardening. And here's the really good news, some real truths I've discovered as a gardener, and that is that plants are not permanent decisions. I am pretty hard on my plants in terms of having high expectations. And that means where I plant my plants, whether it's in the ground, in my raised bed garden, in pots and containers, I'm going to give that plant 2 or 3 months to settle in and show me it can live with the sunlight that it's getting. And if it's not performing well, I'm going to relocate it. If you happen to garden in containers, this is even easier. Oh my goodness. Unless they're massive, huge containers like some of my aqua pots that are super heavy. But most containers you can move, or if it's too heavy to lift, call a friend over, give them a cup of coffee and some cookies, and then see if they'll help you in the garden relocate some of your containers to a sunnier or a shadier spot, depending upon what your plant is telling you. That's something important to know. The other thing is, I have discovered over 40 years of gardening that most plants are tougher than we give them credit for. I have relocated so many plants, big plants, shrubs, small trees, and lots of perennials. They are much more resilient than most of us think. Of course, there are a few exceptions to relocating or transplanting plants. And so, of course, I'm not going to try to transplant or relocate things like established trees. That's a no-go. Those roots are really in the ground for a reason, and so I'm probably not going to do that. There are a couple other plants that I have grown in my own garden that I know don't like to be transplanted, and that would be things like Baptisia or false indigo. They are glorious, glorious shrubs or perennials, but they send out deep, deep tap roots, and once you sever the tap root, it can make it really struggle if you try to relocate it. What else? Oh, peonies. We all know peonies. They are just those plants that, give you flower power for maybe 2 weeks where I live, and then they're done. They are glorious, but peonies really like to stay where they're put. So if you've got a well-established peony plant, and I have tried to relocate mine with, just moderate success. You can try it, but I found, generally speaking, if your peony's been in the ground 3, 4, 5 years, it doesn't want to be moved. On the other hand, some of the easiest plants to lift, chop in half, divide, and replant are things like hostas. Hostas are incredibly tough, and actually they benefit by being lifted and divided every 3 or 4 years. As we wind down our conversation today about the importance of understanding the sunlight requirements of our plants, I just want to encourage you, if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember this. All gardeners learn from observing, from adjusting and being flexible in their garden, and trying again. Understanding sunlight needs in your garden can be one of the biggest confidence boosters for you. And from you being here, you're already getting off to a great start. From you taking the time to think about all these basic gardening elements is going to give you confidence, is hopefully going to continue to motivate you so that you don't say, oh, it's just too much. I don't have a green thumb. Everyone can develop a green thumb. I just want to thank you all so much for hanging out with me today as we talked about that third thing that I wish I had known as a new gardener, and that was understanding sunlight requirements for a variety of plants that you're trying to grow in your garden. If you haven't seen my prior videos in this series, I'll make sure I include them in the link in the description. You might want to check those out because I'm giving you 5 of my top most favorite things that I wish I had known, and I hope you're going to find them helpful as you are planning out your 2026 garden. So until next time, I'm going to wish everybody out there happy gardening.